But yeah, so we've had a lot of developments. Spider-Man related developments rapidly, week to week, day to day, hour to hour, pretty much constantly. Rumors that the Spider-Man video game it may be being bought by Disney and canceled.
It's like a lot of effort just to get back at Sony.
So yeah, so it seems like in both universes, as far as I can tell, Disney is this giant vindictive bitch of a company. And she doesn't like losing this bitch. She really doesn't. She wins at everything all the time. When she doesn't, when she buys it. But with this, it doesn't seem like she's getting what she wants, and she sounds pretty vindictive. Yeah, that's the analogy I'm gonna go with.
All right. Yeah, like, okay, so I had heard something similar to that. I didn't actually hear the whole story. But I do remember, like, seeing an article about it. And then at work earlier today, someone also brought that up about Disney wanting to pull the game. But with how much it would cost to buy the licensing for the Spider-Man video games, that just seems like a lot just to try and get back at Sony. Like, I feel like they get nothing out of it other than just being petty.
Well, that's the thing. They could get a lot out of it. So because the Spider-Man game did well, right? There's a kind of a big picture thing where because the game did well, they might, and their upcoming Avengers game might do well, that they might want to buy those things so that they can do well with them. Whether that includes studio purchases or rights purchases, either way, would be a different question. But that Disney likes to make money, and their video games haven't really been making money, with the exception of like early on Disney Infinity and
they actually had, believe it or not, back in the 90s, a lot of their Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo games actually sold decently well.
Yeah, but that was a different generation.
Oh yeah, very different.
Recent generation.
No, not at all.
Like last 2 or 3 video game generations, I don't think we've had any successful Disney.
There was no franchises that were successful video game wise, but there were a couple one-offs that did good. However, usually with video games, one-offs aren't going to do it for you as a video game developer. You do need a successful franchise, because I know Xfinity was good and it did sell pretty well, and then same with Epic Mickey, but that's not going to be enough for like an entire, if you're not going to franchise it.
Yeah, franchising works better. But I'd also say there are some things that you could probably pull a one-off with. I do know Spider-Man has a history of mainly doing one-off games. There aren't many series, and when there are, they're like 2 games long at most. An example is the Amazing Spider-Man games only went for 2. The Sam Raimi trilogy, I think, is the longest running Spider-Man series, and it was a critical and commercial failure by the 3rd game. Although the 2nd game is still considered to be one of the best Spider-Man games of all time.
Yeah.
The current one, Insomniac, just got it after the previous people who owned it, Beanox, had made multiple different one-off series, none of which were in the same, other than they had like Shattered Dimensions and a sequel to that, and they had Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, but other than that, everything else they did was a one-off.
Well, let me reword what I said. What I mean is, like, Disney doesn't seem to be doesn't seem to be developing game after game. They seem to just do one, not make any games for a few years, then do another. Because I haven't even heard of any Disney games that have come out, like, within the last 5 years. I don't know. I haven't heard of. Maybe there have been, but none that I've heard of.
Yeah, Disney doesn't really make successful large video games that people in the video game sphere care about. There are a lot of like smaller ones that no one cares about, that don't sell very well, that aren't commercially viable. They don't have any Grand Theft Autos, right? They don't have anything at all, really. In fact, until recently, when they slapped their logo on Insomniac's Spider-Man, or Marvel's Insomniac Spider-Man, or Marvel Presents Insomniac Spider-Man, or Insomniac Presents Marvel Spider-Man, whatever title they ended up going with, that's kind of the first game that they've pinned their logo on in a while that did well. Like, really well. It did really well. But I could see them being vindictive against Sony for not getting the movie rights. And that Disney has been trying to buy or get a hold of the rights to those Spider-Man villains, all the ones that Sony's been trying to make solo movies of, and Sony is like, no, we want to do our project.
They are willing to sell it to Disney, but Disney
are they?
Yeah, they do, but the price that they want for it is $5 billion, which, given that Disney just recently bought Fox, and not to mention they're kind of seeing it as, well, we only spent $4 billion on Star Wars, and then
which was an exceptional case because the creator way undervalued the sale of that and then donated all to charity. That was not what it was actually valued at. The Disney purchase of the LucasArts Interactive shit was absolutely phenomenally way beyond expectations when it came to how cheap they bought it for. That was expected to sell for well over 15 billion like starting value bids, and only raised from there. I remember that was really beyond expectations. And Star Wars has not been performing as well as Marvel. Since Disney bought Star Wars, it's way underperformed compared to their Marvel ventures. So, there's probably a lot more value in Spider-Man and his Rogues Gallery than there was in Star Wars, actually. So I don't even think that's a particularly good argument.
But and it was also, Marvel was another thing that they also bought for, I don't remember the exact price, but it also wasn't $5 billion.
Right. It wasn't, but that was also because back then, they hadn't made superhero movies the success of the century yet. Hadn't happened yet.
And then there was those two factors, and then the last factor is the fact that they just bought Fox, which means it's still going to take a while before they can recover those $60 billion that they just spent on Fox. So I think it's like a mixture of all three of those things that are playing into why they're not.
They're Disney. They don't care about any of those things. I actually don't think those are actual things. I think those are things they say to try and get Sony to bid lower. But I don't think any of those actually make a significant difference to a company that's worth trillions. That's not, no.
Yeah, I do think, if they just owned Spider-Man, things would be easier. But here's the other thing that I just realized. Another thing that would make things so much easier, and this is actually 110% Disney's fault, is if Spider-Man, if it wasn't for the fact that Disney kept constantly changing the public domain date, they would be allowed to do whatever they wanted with Spider-Man, because at this point, Spider-Man would be public domain.
Yeah, but there's another big thing with that, is that these companies don't want these in the public domain.
I'm just saying they should be. I think that the fact that they keep changing the public domain date is complete BS, because then you're basically taking away what we could see from other people having their own creative point of views of.
Well, okay, so yes, I agree with you 100% on this, but there's also a really big thing in this. You don't get the MCU in a universe where that's a publicly available domain. You don't. You only get that because there's a lack of competition with that particular set of titles. If you have multiple different versions of the same universe going at once, all with relatively equal value, even if some are much more expensive projects than others, you don't have the same kind of uniform everyone's going and experiencing this that you do with Disney owning the IP.
Here's the thing. I don't think that many companies would try to attempt it, because if that were the case,
it wouldn't just be about companies.
Huh?
It wouldn't just be about companies. If it's public domain, you're not just going to see companies. You're going to be seeing indie studios.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know how many indie film studios already do Spider-Man short films for fun and crap? Do you know how many people would love to jump on doing like Marvel Universe domain stuff in a post-Disney Disneyfied super success world? Like, if those domains went public tomorrow, it would be chaos. It would be batshit crazy.
Yeah, but well, I mean, it would be crazy like on the internet, but you wouldn't have that many people doing it theatrically, I don't think. And my reason for that is because look at the Dark Universe and how there's only been one real attempt at that, even though all those characters are public domain.
Right, except for
anyone could do their own cinematic universe of those characters.
Yeah, except for I'm gonna use your own example against you. The Dark Universe has failed
exactly
time again, but do you know why?
Because no one knows how to do it.
Nope. I actually think they got a pretty good start on doing it, and they were doing it okay, as good as anyone does other than Marvel. I actually think one of the biggest reasons is because those are public domains, and you still had Frankenstein movies coming out. You still had Dracula movies coming out that had nothing to do with these movies, and that were confusing both shareholders and customers. You had like 3 Frankenstein movies come out in the past 5 or 6 years. You had at least 2 Dracula movies. We've had all sorts of random vampire movies. We have rumored Swamp Thing things happening. We have rumored all sorts.
I think you mean Creature of the Black Lagoon. Swamp Thing is DC.
I do mean Swamp Thing.
No, DC is Swamp Thing.
I know.
There's only one project for.
No, yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I'm aware, and that's still a confusion to the. I'm sorry, it is. That's a confusion to that average customer. Someone saying the Thing from the Black Lagoon and Swamp Thing. The average person does not know the difference. They're like, oh, it's a thing from a swamp. That's about it. That's all they got. They don't know about the Universal Dark Universe at the start. They're gonna know that 2 or 3 movies in, when a whole bunch of people writing articles about it, and like news anchors are like, in passing, Universal's movie bombed at the office, blah blah blah. But part of why you didn't have this kind of uniformity is because they were public domain, and they have this kind of universal uniformity already, that these keep getting redone and redone and redone, and they keep getting done all right, but most of them are also failures because they're public domain. What was the I, Frankenstein, that was awful?
Followed by a really good Frankenstein movie that is super underrated.
The one with
James McAvoy and Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah, sorry to go off topic, but that one is so underrated.
I totally 100% agree with you.
Okay, but yeah, continuing on though.
Yeah, but that's the kind of stuff we're talking about them competing with, and part of the reason they can't get on board is probably because they have to explain to investors every time one of these movies comes out that, well, we're trying to make our own brand, our own universe, our own contiguous thing that feels the same, and then someone goes, but I saw Frankenstein last year. And then they have to explain, well, it's not our Frankenstein, or oh, well, we're making a new Frankenstein. Like this, these are the reasons. Public domain is the reason that universe can't get going.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, I don't think it's the sole reason, but that I can definitely.
Oh, but it's a significant one.
The other being that The Mummy is one of the worst fucking monster movies. Yeah, I definitely see your point there. We definitely wouldn't have the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we have now if it wasn't for that. So it's kind of like a whole debate on its own.
Think about it like this. Imagine if Sony had been making an Iron Man movie at the same time Iron Man 2 was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if they had been making a Hulk movie at the same time Hulk was coming out. Imagine if they had made a Thor movie that was completely different when Thor was coming out.
Theoretically, something like that could have actually happened.
Yeah.
Because Thor isn't exactly owned by Marvel. Now, that specific version of Thor, yes. If they tried to, play...
But imagine if you had seen, like one company do the same Thor and the other one do the other same Thor, but one of them had the Enchantress as the main enemy and one of them had the Frost Giants as the main enemy.
Damn.
These are different movies, and maybe the Sony would have chosen a better route, and people didn't like the Thor movie for some reason. I loved it, but people didn't like it overall. It's one of the most maligned franchises in Marvel's bag. Thor 1 was liked but not loved. Thor 2 was hated at worst and liked at best, and by a minority of audiences, it seems, or critics, it seems. Audiences tended to like it. It was a decent Star Wars movie.
I mean, you're not wrong there.
Thor 3 everyone loves, but that's because it's wildly and radically different. But imagine when Thor 1 and 2 were coming out, if Sony had a really good Thor franchise that everyone loved, while Marvel had the one that no one really cared about, And then Marvel had the Iron Man everyone cared about, but Sony had an Iron Man no one cared about. And then each company, because of insider information trading stuff, each knew the other one was aiming for an Avengers thing. So they also both made an Avengers movie within like a year or two of each other. And one was really good and revolutionary because of all the build-up, and the other one was actually a better action movie, but maybe wasn't as iconic. Like if Sony had made just a straight better, like a better finale, because Avengers 1 has a weak finale. It's only good because of the iconography. Meanwhile, so a company going a completely different direction might have gone a completely different direction and made it, we could have seen like a Civil War as the first movie or something. And it would have made a wildly different franchise that wouldn't have ended with Endgame happening. It wouldn't.
It's one of those things where I think overall you're right. Like, we definitely wouldn't have gotten the good cinematic universe that we got now. And, and I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's the big thing. So I want to say that, I want to agree with you only just on that front, on the fact that, yeah, you are completely right in that end. But at the same time, there is that whole thing where morally, I do still think they should be public domain.
Okay, yeah, of course.
At the same time, yeah, I still am glad we got what we got out of them not being public domain, I think.
So in this case, I think it's like a practicality versus like ideology.
Yeah, exactly what it is.